I'm a dead woman. At least that's what my family thinks. They believe I took my last breath in that hospital bed, but the truth is far more complicated. I left them a letter to read after my death, a letter that would change their lives forever. My name is Margaret Wilson, though now I go by Maggie Collins. At 67, I never thought I'd be starting over with a new identity, a new home, and a new life. But sometimes life forces your hand, especially when the people who should love you the most show you exactly how little you matter. It all started with chest pains. Just a twinge at first, nothing serious, I thought. But when I collapsed in my garden on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, my neighbor found me and called an ambulance. The diagnosis came quickly: a severe heart attack with complications. The doctor said I needed immediate surgery and a long recovery period. I called my son Andrew first. He's always been the practical one, the successful businessman with the perfect family and the vacation home in Aspen. His secretary answered and informed me he was in an important meeting. I told her it was an emergency, that I was in the hospital. She put me on hold, then came back to say he'd call me when he was free. He never did. Next, I tried my daughter Melissa. She didn't answer, so I left a voicemail explaining the situation. Hours passed, no response. By evening, when the doctors were prepping me for surgery, I finally received a text from her. "Sorry, Mom, we're finalizing our vacation plans. We'll call tomorrow. Hope you feel better." As they wheeled me into surgery, I realized a devastating truth. I was completely alone when I needed my family most. What would happen if I didn't wake up? Would they even make it to my funeral? Or would it conflict with their precious vacation? But I did wake up. And what I discovered in the days that followed would change everything I thought I knew about my family and myself. Because sometimes being abandoned is just the beginning of the story. I spent 6 days in intensive care after that surgery, fighting for my life, while my family was fighting over who would have to cancel their plans to deal with Mom. I know this because I heard them. Not in person, of course. They never actually came to the hospital. But the nurse accidentally left my phone on speaker during one of their calls. Little did they know that their conversation would become the first page of my new life story. "She's stable now, but recovery could take months," I heard the nurse telling Andrew over the phone. "She shouldn't be alone during this time." My son's voice came through clearly. "Look, we've got this trip to Europe that's been planned for a year. Non-refundable tickets. Isn't there some kind of facility she could go to temporarily?" A facility. Like I was an inconvenient piece of furniture that needed storage. The nurse, bless her heart, sounded shocked. "Mr. Wilson, your mother nearly died. She needs family support, not a nursing home." "Well, Melissa can't take her either. She's got the kids and that new job. Maybe Mom should have thought about this before she let her health go." Let my health go? I'd never smoked a day in my life. I walked 3 miles every morning. My blood pressure had always been perfect until now. That night, as I lay there with tubes coming out of my chest and monitors beeping around me, I made a decision. If I meant so little to them alive, perhaps I'd mean more to them dead. Or maybe, just maybe, I'd finally be free. I asked a kind nurse named Sarah for help with my plan. She was initially reluctant, but after witnessing my family's neglect firsthand, not one visit in 6 days, she understood. Sarah had seen too many elderly patients discarded by families eager to get their hands on inheritances or simply unwilling to be burdened. "What exactly are you planning, Margaret?" she asked, checking my IV. "I'm going to disappear," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice, "and I need your help." Sarah looked at me for a long moment. "I could lose my job." "I know, but I could lose much more than that if I go back to that life." She sighed deeply. "Tell me what you need." What I needed was simple: time and privacy to set my plan in motion. Because before I disappeared, I had something important to do. I needed to write that letter, the one that would haunt my children long after they thought I was gone. And I needed to make some very important phone calls to people who, unlike my family, would actually answer. The first call was to my lawyer, Thomas Green. We'd been friends for 40 years, and he was the only person I trusted completely. I explained everything: the heart attack, my family's abandonment, and my plan. "Margaret, this is extreme," he said, his voice thick with concern. "So was hearing my son try to dump me in a nursing home while planning his European vacation," I replied. "Tom, I've spent my entire life taking care of others. George worked all those long hours building his business, and I raised the children practically alone. When he died, I gave Andrew control of the company because that's what he wanted. I let Melissa live in our vacation home rent-free for 3 years after her divorce. I've always put them first. And now, when I need them for once—" "I understand," he said softly. "What do you need me to do?" "I need you to help me disappear and start over. And I need you to hold on to a letter that my family will receive after my death." Thomas agreed to help, though I could hear the reservation in his voice. He didn't approve, but he respected my choice. That's what real love looks like: supporting someone even when you don't agree with their decisions. The second call was to my old college roommate, Catherine. She'd moved to Maine after retiring and had been begging me to visit for years. Instead, I asked if I could live with her, at least until I got back on my feet. "Maggie, what in the world?" she gasped when I told her my plan. "I know it sounds crazy, Kat, but I need this. I need to find out who I am when I'm not someone's mother or wife or CEO's widow. I need to know if anyone would miss me, not my money, not my help, not what I can do for them. Just me." There was a long pause before Catherine answered. "Well, I've always said retirement was too quiet up here. When do you arrive?" With my escape route secured, I focused on the details. Thomas would help me legally change my name after I died. I would withdraw enough cash to start over, not enough to raise suspicions, but enough to build a new life. Sarah agreed to help with my medical discharge, making sure it happened when no family members were likely to suddenly appear. Everything was falling into place. All that remained was to write the letter, my final message to the family who couldn't be bothered to visit me in the hospital. I took out a pen and paper and began to write words that came from the deepest part of my broken heart. Words that would make them question everything they thought they knew about me, about themselves, and about the inheritance they were so eager to claim. I was discharged on a Thursday morning. According to my plan, this would give me exactly 72 hours before my family would discover I wasn't at the hospital anymore. Andrew had finally texted that they'd try to visit on Sunday before they left for Europe on Monday. How generous of them. Sarah wheeled me out to a taxi where Thomas was waiting. He looked nervous, his usual confident demeanor replaced with fidgeting hands and darting eyes. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Margaret?" he asked as we drove away from the hospital. "More certain than I've been about anything in decades," I replied, watching the hospital shrink in the rear window. It felt symbolic, my old life getting smaller as I moved towards something new. We went straight to his office where he had prepared all the necessary paperwork. A name change would take time to process legally, but he'd created a solid plan that would allow me to establish my new identity as Maggie Collins while the legal wheels turned. I've arranged for a death certificate to be issued next week. Medical examiner is a friend who understands unique situations. Officially, you'll have died from complications following your heart surgery. And my body? Cremation. No service as per your written wishes. He slid a document across the desk, a new will I'd asked him to prepare before my surgery. One that specified immediate cremation with no funeral service. My children won't question that? Thomas gave me a sad smile. Based on what you've told me about their recent behavior, I doubt they'll push for a more elaborate send-off, especially since this will also states that your assets won't be distributed until 30 days after your death. They'll be too busy figuring out your finances to worry about funeral arrangements. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of sadness and liberation. And the letter? Will be delivered with the will as requested. I spent that night in a small hotel under my new name, staring at the ceiling and wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life or finally doing something right for myself. By morning, I'd made peace with my decision. I boarded a bus to Maine with nothing but 2 suitcases and the clothes on my back. As the bus pulled away from the station, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. For the first time in years, the woman looking back at me seemed curious about what came next. I smiled at her, and surprisingly, she smiled back. Little did I know that my carefully orchestrated disappearance would unravel in ways I never anticipated, and that the letter I left behind would set in motion events that would eventually bring my past crashing into my future. Maine was everything Catherine had promised. Peaceful, beautiful, and far removed from my old life. Her cottage sat on the edge of a small coastal town called Millport, where the ocean stretched endlessly before us, and the air smelled of salt and pine. "You can stay as long as you need," she said, showing me to a small guest room with windows facing the water. "Though I should warn you, there's not much excitement around here unless you count Mrs. Peterson's aggressive seagull feeding as a spectator sport." I laughed, really laughed, for what felt like the first time in years. Excitement is overrated. I've had enough drama to last a lifetime. In those first few weeks, I existed in a strange limbo. Legally, Margaret Wilson was dead, but Maggie Collins wasn't fully born yet. I stayed close to Catherine's cottage, afraid of being recognized, even though we were hundreds of miles from my old home. I dyed my silver hair a soft auburn, started wearing glasses I didn't need, and practiced introducing myself with my new name until it felt natural. Meanwhile, Thomas kept me updated on events back home. My death had gone exactly as planned. The death certificate was issued, the cremation was recorded, and my children were informed. How did they take it? I asked during one of our secure calls. Thomas hesitated. Andrew seemed shocked. Apparently, he didn't expect complications. Melissa cried, from what I could tell. And the letter? Delivered yesterday, along with the will. I haven't heard their reaction yet. I wondered what they thought as they read my words. Had they felt guilt? Remorse? Or were they simply calculating their inheritance minus the inconvenience of caring for their mother? The letter had been brutally honest, perhaps the most honest I'd been with them in years. I told them I knew they hadn't visited me in the hospital. I knew about their vacation plans, their reluctance to deal with Mom. I explained that in my final days, I'd realized a devastating truth. I had raised children who saw me as an obligation, not as a person with feelings and needs of her own. I gave you everything, I had written, my time, my love, my support, and when you needed me most, you couldn't even postpone a vacation. So now I'm giving you what you've always wanted, freedom from your burdensome mother. I hope the inheritance is worth the cost to your souls. It was harsh, perhaps too harsh, but dying, even symbolically, gives you a certain freedom to speak your truth. What I didn't know then was that my letter would have consequences, far beyond making my children feel guilty. I couldn't have predicted how it would change them, or how their search for answers would eventually lead them straight to Millport, Maine. And I certainly never imagined that my new beginning would be interrupted by the past I thought I'd left behind just when I was learning who Maggie Collins really was. 6 months into my new life, I barely recognized myself, and not just because of the auburn hair. I'd taken a part-time job at Millport's small library, mostly for something to do rather than for the modest paycheck. For the first time since I was a young woman, I was making my own choices, based solely on what I wanted, not what was expected of me. I joined a pottery class. I volunteered at the local animal shelter. I made friends who knew nothing about Margaret Wilson's wealth or status. They just liked Maggie Collins for her book recommendations and her surprisingly good blueberry muffins. "You seem happier," Catherine remarked one evening as we sat on her porch watching the sunset. "Lighter, somehow." "I am," I admitted. I never realized how much of myself I'd lost until I had the chance to find it again. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had to die to finally start living. But beneath the contentment of my new existence, questions lingered. Did my children miss me at all? Had my letter made any impact? Or had they simply divided my assets and moved on with their lives, relieved to be free of their difficult mother? Thomas's updates had become less frequent. He mentioned that Andrew had taken over the family business completely, and that Melissa had moved into my old house with her children. But beyond these practical matters, he offered little insight into their emotional states. "They don't exactly confide in me," he explained when I pressed for details. "I'm just the family lawyer to them." I told myself it didn't matter. I'd made my choice, and they had made theirs long before my heart attack. We were all better off this way. Then came the video. It was Catherine who saw it first, while browsing social media on her tablet. "Maggie," she called from the living room, her voice strange. "You need to see this." I walked over to find her staring at the screen, her face pale. "What is it?" It's a video of you, well, not you now, but you before, at your grandson's birthday party last year. My heart pounded as she turned the screen toward me. There I was, Margaret Wilson in her pearl earrings and cashmere sweater, helping little Jacob blow out his candles. The video had been posted by a mommy blogger who'd attended the party, then picked up by a TikTok account that cross-referenced the birthday footage with old news screenshots. The caption beneath it made my blood run cold. Found her. Grandma Ghost is alive and well in Maine. She changed her name. She's got a new family, and we love her even more now. Comments were flooding in. Some people praising me, calling it a legend move. Others accusing me of abandoning my real family, like I was the villain. My face was suddenly everywhere again, and worse, my location. The video had tagged the town name. I sat down hard on the floor, heart thumping like it had when I was in that hospital bed, helpless and wired up. How did they find me? I whispered, though the question wasn't really for Catherine. It was for the universe that had decided my peace couldn't last. Because now that my cover was blown, it was only a matter of time before my past came knocking on Catherine's door, demanding answers I wasn't sure I was ready to give. The waiting was the worst part. Every car that slowed near Catherine's cottage, every unfamiliar face in town, made my heart race. Someone knew I was here. Everyone knew I was here. It was only a matter of time. Maybe you should reach out to them first, Catherine suggested 3 days after the video appeared, on your terms. I shook my head. And say what? Sorry I faked my death, but you were terrible children? There's no greeting card for this situation, Kat. Despite my flippant response, I'd been asking myself the same question. What would I say to Andrew and Melissa when they found me? Would I apologize? Stand my ground? Both options seemed inadequate given the magnitude of what I'd done. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was scared, but because I knew what was coming and I didn't want to waste a single second pretending I was still safe. By morning, I'd packed a small bag, just in case I needed to disappear again, and turned off the Wi-Fi, as if that could somehow stem the tide of exposure. But before I could even figure out where I'd go next, I saw the silver Toyota with Massachusetts plates creeping past the library parking lot like a shark in shallow water. I knew it was Melissa before I even saw her face. Something in the way she parked too neatly, like she was still trying to earn a gold star. She stepped out in jeans and a cardigan, like we were meeting for brunch and not after my supposed death, then stood by the entrance holding a paper coffee cup and looking like she hadn't slept in weeks. I watched her from behind the stacks for a full 5 minutes before stepping outside. And when I did, she didn't speak at first, just stared, like she was trying to confirm I was real. Then she said, "Mom, please don't walk away." Her voice cracked at the word mom, and I felt the old urge to comfort her rise up like a reflex I hadn't killed yet, but I didn't move closer. She stepped toward me. "You're not a ghost. You're not gone. You can come home." I looked her dead in the eye and said, "I already did the funeral. You just weren't there." She flinched like I'd slapped her. Maybe words can hit harder than hands sometimes. "We thought you were in surgery. By the time we got to the hospital, they told us there were complications, that you were gone." And before that, the 6 days I was in intensive care, where were you then, Melissa? She looked down at her coffee cup.
We were busy with the vacation plans. I know. I heard everything. Her head snapped up. What do you mean you heard everything? The nurse left the phone on speaker during Andrew's call. I heard him trying to find a facility to dump me in so you could all enjoy Europe. I heard it all. Tears filled her eyes. Mom, we didn't mean... Don't tell me what you didn't mean. Tell me what you did. Tell me why your vacation was more important than your dying mother. The conversation that followed would change everything I thought I knew about my children and force me to question whether my dramatic disappearance had been justice or just another form of abandonment.
It wasn't about the vacation, Melissa said, her voice small but steady. It was never about that. We'd moved to a bench overlooking the harbor. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of the sea and the promise of the coming winter. In another life, I might have found it peaceful. Then what was it about? I asked. She took a deep breath. Do you remember when Dad died? How you shut down completely? I stiffened. I was grieving. We all were, but you disappeared into yourself. We needed our mother, and instead we got this perfect robot who handled the funeral arrangements and the business transition and never shed a single tear where anyone could see. I was trying to be strong for you. You were hiding from us, she countered, just like you're hiding now. Her words hit with unexpected force. I had thought I was punishing them with my disappearance, but what if I was actually following a pattern I'd established long ago? After Dad died, Melissa continued, you started to manage us instead of relating to us. You'd call with lists of things we should be doing. You'd give advice we didn't ask for. You'd make plans without consulting us, then be hurt when we couldn't drop everything to accommodate you. That's not true, I protested, but even as the words left my mouth, memories surfaced that suggested otherwise. The Christmas I'd rebooked everyone's flights without asking because I thought my schedule was more convenient. The time I'd redecorated Melissa's guest room while she was away because I thought it needed updating. When you had your heart attack, Andrew and I were terrified, but we were also, God, this sounds awful. We were relieved. Relieved that I might die? My voice was barely audible. No! Relieved that maybe, finally, you'd let us in. That you'd let us be a family again instead of employees in the Margaret Wilson life management system. She wiped tears from her cheeks. But then the nurse said you were being difficult, refusing certain medications, insisting on handling your own care plan, even though you could barely sit up. And Andrew just broke. He said, she won't even let us help her when she's dying. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process her words. Had I really been so controlling, so unwilling to show vulnerability that my own children felt shut out? The vacation, Melissa said quietly, was Andrew's idea. He thought if we gave you a few days to realize you actually needed help, you might finally let us in. It was stupid and childish, but we were desperate. We were going to cancel it and come back after the weekend. But I died first, I said flatly. But you didn't die. You ran away. You let us believe we'd lost our mother forever. Do you have any idea what that did to us? As Melissa described the months following my death, the guilt, the grief, the questions, I began to see my grand gesture of disappearance in a new light. I had thought I was teaching them a lesson about appreciating me. Instead,
I might have been proving them right about my inability to be emotionally honest. And then she told me about the letter and how it had changed everything in ways I never could have anticipated.
"Your letter destroyed Andrew," Melissa said. "He read it and didn't speak for 3 days. Then he started drinking. He lost the Johnson account because he showed up drunk to the meeting. His wife took the kids to her mother's. He's a mess, Mom." I felt sick. I had wanted my words to hurt them, to make them feel the pain I'd felt lying alone in that hospital bed. But I'd never imagined they could cause such destruction. "And you?" I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. "I'm angry," she said simply. "Furious, actually. Not just because you let us think you were dead, but because you thought so little of us that you believed we wouldn't care if you were." "You didn't visit me in the hospital," I reminded her. "We were coming that Sunday. We called the hospital every day for updates. I have the phone logs to prove it. Yes, we should have been there sooner. We made a terrible mistake trying to teach you some bizarre lesson about needing us. But you made us believe you were dead, Mom, for 7 months. How is that an appropriate response?" She was right, of course. In my hurt and anger, I'd gone nuclear. I'd chosen the most painful possible way to punish them, without considering that perhaps I wasn't the only one who felt unseen and unheard in our relationship. "How did you find me?" I asked, changing the subject because I wasn't ready to face the magnitude of what I'd done. "We didn't, not really. After that video went viral, people started sending tips. Someone recognized you from the library. Andrew wanted to come, but—" She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. "He's in rehab, 30-day program." The weight of my actions pressed down on me. My son was in rehab. My daughter was sitting beside me, simultaneously relieved I was alive and furious that I'd lied. And I was caught between defending my choice and recognizing its cruelty. "What happens now?" I asked. Melissa looked out at the water. "That's up to you, I guess. You can keep being Maggie Collins and pretend Margaret Wilson really did die in that hospital, or you can come home and we can try to fix what's broken between us, all of us." "And if I stay?" She turned to me, her eyes so like her father's, full of a mixture of pain and resolve. "Then we'll respect your choice, but we'll know you're out there, Mom. We'll always know." I didn't answer immediately. The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted anymore. Maggie Collins had found peace here in Millport, made friends, built a simple but satisfying life. But Margaret Wilson had unfinished business with her children, grievances to air, apologies to make, relationships to repair if possible. As the sun began to set over the harbor, casting long shadows across the water, I realized that whichever path I chose, I couldn't hide anymore, not from my family and not from myself. The question wasn't whether I would go back to my old life or continue my new one. The question was whether I could finally find the courage to be honest about who I was, what I needed, and the mistakes I'd made along the way. Because the truth I was beginning to understand was that my dramatic disappearance hadn't been about teaching my children a lesson at all. It had been about avoiding the hardest thing of all, showing them my broken heart and asking them to help me heal it.
I didn't go back with Melissa that day. I told her I needed time to think, to decide what I really wanted. She gave me her number and left,
promising that whatever I chose, she would respect it. After she drove away, I walked along the shore for hours, watching the waves crash against the rocks and thinking about identity, who Margaret Wilson had been, who Maggie Collins was becoming, and whether the two could ever coexist. That night I called Thomas. "They found me," I said when he answered. "I know," he replied. "Melissa called me from the road. Are you okay?" "I don't know. She told me about Andrew, about the rehab." Thomas sighed heavily. "It's been rough for them, Margaret. Rougher than I think you intended." "I didn't think," I began, then stopped. The truth was, I hadn't thought. Not about the long-term consequences. Not about how deeply my disappearance would wound them. I'd been so focused on my own pain that I'd weaponized my absence in the cruelest possible way. "What should I do?" I asked, though I already knew he couldn't answer that for me. "What do you want to do?" he countered. The question hung in the air between us. What did I want? To punish my children further? To continue hiding in Maine? Or to find some way forward that acknowledged both the hurt I experienced and the hurt I caused? After saying goodbye to Thomas, I sat on Catherine's porch swing until well past midnight. She brought me tea and a blanket, then left me to my thoughts. By morning, I had made my decision. I would not go back to being Margaret Wilson. Not exactly. That woman, the controlling mother, the perfect widow, the woman who hid her vulnerability behind a mask of capability, she had indeed died in that hospital room. But I wouldn't continue as Maggie Collins either, at least not as a complete fabrication designed to escape my past. Instead, I would try to become someone new, someone who carried the best parts of both women, someone who could acknowledge her mistakes and work to repair the damage she had caused, someone brave enough to be honest about her needs and flaws. I called Melissa and asked her to come back to Millport, but not to take me home. Instead, I asked her to bring Andrew once he completed his program. I would meet them here, on neutral ground, and we would talk, really talk, perhaps for the first time in decades. 1 month later, they arrived together. Andrew looked thinner, his face lined with strain, but his eyes clearer than they'd been in years. We met at a small restaurant overlooking the harbor, the three of us seated awkwardly around a table laden with food none of us had much appetite for. "I'm not coming back," I said after the initial stilted greetings. "Not permanently. I've built something here that matters to me." Their faces fell, but I continued before they could speak. "But I'm not hiding anymore, either. I'd like to be part of your lives again, if you'll have me. Not as the mother who tries to manage everything, but as just me. Flawed, sometimes needy, often stubborn, but trying to do better." Andrew spoke for the first time, his voice rough with emotion. "We'd like that." "I've hurt you both terribly," I acknowledged. "What I did was wrong, no matter how justified I felt at the time. I'm so sorry." "We hurt you too," Melissa said quietly. "We should have been there." For the next several hours, we talked more honestly than we ever had before. About George's death and how it had changed all of us. About the ways we'd failed each other over the years. About expectations and disappointments, and the possibility of forgiveness. It wasn't easy.
There were tears and raised voices, and moments when it seemed the gulf between us might be too wide to bridge. But there was also laughter eventually, and memories that didn't hurt quite as much to revisit together. By the time we parted, we had the beginnings of a plan. I would stay in Millport, where I'd found a peace I'd never known in my old life, but I would visit them regularly, and they would come to me. We would rebuild slowly, with clear boundaries and open communication. As they prepared to leave, Andrew hesitated, then pulled an envelope from his pocket. He found this after we thought you died. It was in Dad's old desk. I opened it with trembling fingers to find a letter from George, written in the final days of his illness, but never given to me. In it, he thanked me for our life together, but expressed worry that I didn't know how to need people, how to let myself be vulnerable enough to be truly loved. "You're so strong, Margaret," he'd written, "but sometimes I wonder if our children know the tender-hearted woman I fell in love with, or if they only see the capable mother who never seems to need anything from anyone. Don't hide your heart from them after I'm gone. They need to know all of you, not just the parts you think are acceptable to show." I looked up at my children through tears. He was right. I never showed you that I needed you. I thought being strong meant never being vulnerable. I was wrong. Melissa took my hand. "We're learning too, Mom. All of us." As they drove away, I stood watching until their car disappeared around the bend. Then I walked back to Catherine's cottage, my cottage now, as she decided to move to Arizona to be closer to her grandchildren and had sold it to me for a ridiculously generous price. I sat on the porch swing listening to the waves and thinking about identity again. I wasn't Margaret Wilson, not entirely, nor was I only Maggie Collins. I was becoming someone new, someone who could acknowledge her strength and her vulnerability, who could set boundaries without building walls, who could forgive without forgetting. Sometimes you have to get lost to find yourself, and sometimes you have to be found to truly understand what was lost.